give you an introduction and then we'll let's take it over. Roll. All right, good morning. Good morning. How y'all doing? All right, I've been announcing for weeks that Nancy Oliver would be joining us on the 24th. It's the 24th. Super excited to have her join us. She's going to be sharing with you part of her ministry that she's called into in the prisons and the jails. It's a really cool ministry, as I said at the early service. I've not made any secrets of hiding the fact that I want to support this as a church. I think this is a great ministry to get behind, and so we wanted to have her come and share a little bit about what she does and her heart and the vision and all of that. So I'm just going to turn it over to Nancy. I'm going to pray for her first, and then we'll go from there. Lord, we lift Nancy up to you, and we ask, as we always do, that you would speak through your servant, Lord, that you would give her the words to say, and that you would be bringing the message that needs to be heard, Lord. In your name, amen. All right.
I'm going to take this mask off because I feel like you can't really hear me, and I have a barrier between me and you. But I'm far enough away from everybody. Took my mask off, took my mic off, took everything off. It's crazy times. So I am Nancy Oliver. I'm a deacon at St. Mark's in Cocoa Village. I was 5 years at the cathedral. When I first was ordained, I was called to the cathedral, and now I've been at St. Mark's for almost 2 years now. I came to St. Mark's in part because I've been a 40-hour-a-week full-time chaplain at the Brevard County Jail since 2017. And women would ask me in the jail, where can we find you on Sunday morning? And I was kind of demure. It's like, well, sometimes I might be at St. Mark's, or sometimes I might be at St. Gabriel's, because they're not going to catch a bus on Sunday morning to the cathedral. And eventually I felt like I needed to come over here so I could be closer to the people I was ministering to. Jail ministry is a really interesting thing. First of all, when you're like in third grade and you watch something on TV and there's a bad person either in a show or on the news, everybody says, oh, they go to jail. You don't know where that is. You don't know what that means. You don't know how long that goes. But we grow up with that in our head, and we never really get past our third grade. Well, that guy's in jail. Where is the jail? I don't know. You're there. But they are God's people too. And that's really hard for us to get, except Jesus said it. You know, in Matthew 25, Jesus says, I was in prison and you didn't visit me. It's like, we didn't even know you were in prison. He said, yeah, what you don't do for them, you don't do for me. So the jail ministry is very interesting. First of all, there's a really big problem with mental health and people ending up in jail. We have a whole government system that says, if you can prove you have a mental illness, we will give you money every month because we know you can't support yourself and we know you're going to need this Social Security benefit. So you prove that you're schizophrenic, and then you go out and act like you're schizophrenic, and then we put you in jail. And we don't let you out. There is a man in the Brevard County Jail right now who has been in the Brevard County Jail for 6 years on and off. And I'm talking mostly on because he'll get out for 3 days and get back in. He's currently been in jail for, I think, a year. Maybe it was December, so not quite a year. Because he got out of jail and he went to a Circle K. He stole a beer and some Kit Kat bars. And the person, he walked out and didn't pay. The person called the police. The police come in and get him. He throws everything at the police and says, I didn't want this stuff anyway, and he tries to get away. Now he's in jail. He threw stuff at the police, so that's assault on a police officer. He stole stuff. And he has been in for 6 years, out for 2 days, out for 3 days, out for 3 hours once. He was out for 3 hours and back in. He's mentally ill. He should be in a mental hospital. They should be adjusting his meds. We have a very lean mental health department. Their job mostly is to make sure nobody is suicidal. If you're suicidal, we want to put you in a place where we can keep an eye on you. But they're not doing a lot of counseling. The counseling's coming from the chaplain's office. And we have had as many as 1,800 inmates since I've been there. And right when COVID started, all the judges were letting everybody go. Just, here's your court date, see you on Zoom. And we got down into the upper 13s. But we're hovering in the 16 and 17 range right now. So we have 1,600 to 1,700 inmates in the Brevard County Jail. We have a serious problem with people with mental illness that are in the jail, but it's me and the male chaplain. His name is John Nienhuis, and we are supposed to make sure that people who are sending messages saying, I need to talk to a chaplain, I need to talk to somebody, I need to talk to somebody about my spirituality, I need to talk to somebody because my kids are in DCF custody. Sometimes I've got my deacon God hat on, my chaplain hat on, and sometimes I have to put my social work hat on because I am by degree a social worker. I am by ordination clergy, and I am in the jail, and that's a whole different kind of a place to be. We have a huge problem with drugs in this country and consequently in this county, and not everybody who is in jail on drugs have drug charges, because prostitution is almost always a drug charge. It just doesn't say drugs, it says prostitution. But why is that woman prostituting herself? Because she needs crack. We have if you have false verification of ownership to a pawnbroker, that's drugs. I'm going to walk down the street, I see your weed eater, I grab it, take it to the pawn shop, say I want to pawn this so I can get money for drugs. So drugs have been pervasive in our environment, and one of the problems with drugs for me is that I'm giving death notifications 3 and 4 times a week. I'm telling this father his daughter died of drugs. I'm telling this 30-year-old that her 60-year-old mother died of drugs this morning, drug overdose this morning. We were giving more drug death notifications than COVID death notifications. So that's a huge problem. We also have a huge problem in that the whole system is broken. I can only do what I can do, but I want to tell you the story about Faith. Faith was 82 years old and came into jail last May. She had been a gambler in her 60s and also had access to a doctor's office credit card because she was a business consultant for the doctor's office. And she embezzled a lot of money during her 60s and her gambling problem. So she was caught, and in her early 70s, she spent 2 years in prison. And when she got out of prison, they put her on, like, probation for life. And so last March, maybe early April, she decided to drive to Jacksonville to see her sister for her sister's 87th birthday. Except that she kind of didn't really remember she had to call anybody to get permission to do that. She just went. And on the way back, she spent 5 nights at 5 different hotels in Volusia County. Well, actually 4 nights, because on the 5th night, she just drove around all day, and when it got dark, she'd stop at a hotel. On the 5th night, she walks up to the counter and says, I don't know who I am or how I got here. Do you know who I am? So that person called the police. They Baker Acted her. At the Baker Act facility, they realized she had a UTI, which causes confusion in older people with dementia. She was in the hospital for 18 days. This must have been quite the urinary tract infection, but when she got out, she had a warrant issued for violation of probation because she was out of the county, and she changed addresses because 18 days makes that an address. So she didn't tell anybody she was out of the county, and she changed addresses without notifying her probation officer, so she got arrested for violation of probation. I don't know if it's true in all states, but I know in this state, you don't get bond for violation of probation. You just sit there until they decide what to do with you. She's 82 years old with dementia. I would go to visit her, and for the most of the time she was in jail, which was 11 months, she turned 83 in our jail. There's a green mat about this thick. It's a little thinner than a twin bed mat, about the length of a twin bed mat, but they fold them up and carry them around when they move from one pod to another, so they're not very thick or very heavy. And she was sleeping on that mat on a concrete floor with no television, a shower about every 2 or 3 days, depending on how busy the deputies were, and got to go out on the rec yard, which is a cement slab with a big chain link fence and barbed wire around it, a couple times a week. And I would go and see her, and she would tell me things like, you know, I went and saw this man. I think he's the governor of South Carolina, and we had a great day, and then after that, we went to Alan Ladd's house. She was not there. She didn't need to be in jail. Not one person in this room or in this county is safer because she spent 11 months in jail. We have a broken system. If you violate probation, it doesn't matter why or how, you don't get bond. And if you have the kind of problem she has, DCF won't step in unless you're out, and they won't let you out unless somebody steps in, and we were just in a mess. So I actually kept working, and after 11 months was finally be able to prevail upon the state attorney and the probation and parole office that if they would get the judge to release her, I would make sure that DCF took custody and she wouldn't just be on the streets free. So in April, we got her out of jail. On Friday morning in April, the judge, 8 o'clock, 8:30, signed that she was released. All day I was trying to make sure with probation and parole that there's not any kind of terms. We don't want her to be in trouble again because she doesn't call you. She won't be able to do that. We got that all straight. They didn't let her out until 5:20 that night. I walked down the ramp with her. She was 138 pounds when she got there. She was 103 when she left. I walked down the ramp with her. I called DCF. I'd been on the phone with them all day saying, this is happening, be ready. But we couldn't get out before evening on a Friday afternoon. So, well, I called them and they said, okay, we'll tell the supervisor, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. For 3 hours we sat in that parking lot. She used her knee for a cell phone. She would lean over in my car and talk to her knee. Yeah, we're going to go to a ball game. After the ball game, we'll come see you. I finally, after 3 hours, I called them and I said, we haven't heard from anybody what's going on. And they said, well, call the supervisor. The supervisor finally called me and said, yeah, we're not coming tonight. We can make sure somebody else comes here tomorrow. I said, I thought you had 4 hours. He said, oh, we don't follow that anymore. He said, you can call the EMTs. They'll come and get her. I said, you're not putting her with anything with a siren on it again. She's been through enough of this. So he said we could take her to a hospital, and they would take her in, and they would call DCF and blah, blah, blah. So I took her to McDonald's because we'd been sitting there for 3 hours, but they have dinner at like 4 in the afternoon because they have breakfast at 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning, everybody's woken up to have breakfast, and then they have lunch at like 10, and then they have dinner at like 3:34, and then, so she already had dinner by 3:30 or 4, and who knows if she ate it. So I took her to McDonald's, and she ate a whole Big Mac. She was 103 pounds, like this tall. And then I took her to the hospital, and they were gracious and kind to her, and she was taken in, but she was in that hospital for almost a month before DCF found a place for her to go. This is a nutso system. But if I wasn't in the jail, she'd probably still be there because I was the only one that was willing to kind of go out on a limb and try to circumvent the system and say, guys, do this. People, will you do this? So, kind of a major coup. I was telling Father Todd earlier today, my worst day in the jail was September 17th, and I won't tell you the whole story, but suffice it to say that there was an inmate in jail whose daughter was 7 years old in Arnold Palmer. He didn't even know she was in the hospital, but the doctor's calling to tell him they're going to take her off of life support. And I was instrumental in getting him a Zoom meeting where he could talk to her and see her before they disconnected, and then I sat with him while they disconnected her, and his daughter died before our eyes. But if I hadn't been there, I'm not sure who would have taken that role, who would have done anything. It certainly left me a mess for several weeks after because sitting there watching a beautiful little 7-year-old girl be disconnected from life support was something you don't ever really want to have to do. But like I said, I have to notify people when their loved ones have died. And here they are in a jail. How do we grieve? We grieve because we come together and tell the stories. But who can they tell the stories to? We always arrange a grief phone call, but you've got 15, 20 minutes on the phone with somebody, and sometimes they're kind of focused on the wrong things. It's like, well, you got to get me out of here. Yeah, see if you can get Natalie to post my bond. It's like, focus on what you're supposed to be focused on. But they can't because they feel like, I can't really grieve. I need to get with you guys. So they waste their time sometimes not telling the stories. You need to come together and eat the casseroles and share the stories. And they can't grieve appropriately in jail. And so many people, I've told them their mother died, their grandmother died, their father died, their daughter died. It's a rough thing, and then I've got to walk through that grief with them. It's like I've got it on my list. Okay, go see Tom again this week because I had to tell him 2 weeks ago, and I saw him 3 times last week, and trying to help him make sure he's doing okay. The system is very broken when you have people who have schizophrenia, and one branch of the government says you have mental illness, but when you act like you have mental illness, we don't take you to a facility for people with mental illness, we take you to a jail. The system is very broken when people with dementia are laying on mats for a year. But I feel like it's an important ministry, because first of all, it's a jail, it's not even a prison, but some people have been in there for years and years because they're fighting big charges, and so they continue. But it's a jail. It's our county jail. So it could be your neighbor's child, or your grandson, or your friend in jail. And because I'm there, if somebody calls and says, hey, my daughter's there and she really needs somebody to talk to, I can put it on my list and try to get over there today or tomorrow, because sometimes I have my day all planned out and everything goes sideways, so you never know. But I can try to make it happen today, but it might be tomorrow. But because I'm there, somebody can go see them, comfort them, talk to them. Now we certainly do have the frequent flyers who come in and go out and come in and go out, and while they're there, they find Jesus, and when they're there, they're never going to do drugs again, and when they get out, they go to what they know. Their biggest coping skill is getting high. I don't know what to do else, but, my mom wouldn't let me come and live with her, and then I had to go live with my boyfriend, and he does drugs, so I was doing drugs, and then we all got arrested. Goes around in a circle. But I do sometimes get kind of amazing reassurance that what I'm doing is good. First, I'll tell you the starfish story. If you know it, just don't tell anybody. A young man walks over the dunes one morning onto the beach, and the beach is covered with starfish that got left there when the tide went out. He's like, when the sun gets up, they're all going to die. So he starts grabbing them up by one leg and slinging them into the water, An older man's walking down the beach, and he comes up to me and goes, what the hell are you doing? And he said, these starfish are all going to die when the sun comes up. I'm trying to get them back. And he looks up and down the beach and he goes, what difference does it make? I mean, there's too many of them. He picks one up and he slings it. He goes, it mattered to that one. So sometimes I have a starfish story. I have Anna, who was in the jail. She was 60 years old. Interestingly enough, her husband was 90, but they'd been married for almost 30 years. And he had dementia. And she was arrested for driving on a suspended license. He was with her. She didn't know where he went. She was in a panic. She didn't know where her husband was. The police apparently took him back to his apartment, but he was there for several days before he had a son came down from Kentucky from a previous relationship and took him to Kentucky, but she still didn't know where he was. Nobody called her, wrote to her, told her where he was. She was coming to my Bible studies. She was having her own desperation, moments of desperation. I brought communion. I often bring communion. When I do a Bible study, I'll bring communion, and I do communion and don't tell the bishop, although I think he already knows. I never ask anybody what their baptism status is. If I'm giving communion, I tell them this is the body of Christ, and you belong to Christ. And I gave her communion, and she wept that day. And she weeps still if she'll tell you about it. She's been out for about 4 years. We went last year when she joined a church in Titusville, and she'd been out for a couple years, but she'd been visiting or whatever, and she joined a church in Titusville. And she stood up then and gave her testimony that I found Jesus in jail, and Chaplain Nancy, who's sitting right here, was there and came and brought me communion. And for the first time in like 30 years, I had communion. And this 2 weeks ago, she was on a Kairos on the outside team, and Kairos is like a Cristillo for people in jail, but they have Kairos on the outside for relatives of people who are in jail or people who have been incarcerated in the past, because either way it's trauma. You're traumatized if you go to jail, you're traumatized if your son, brother, husband are in jail, and you're trying to live a life and know that they're there. So they have these Kairos on the outside weekends, and I sponsored her for one in 2019, then they didn't have one in 20, because COVID time, I sponsored her to go as a participant, to kind of get closer to God and to release herself of some of the trauma. And they invited her to be on the team. And she was on a team for this weekend like 2 weeks ago when we went for the closing. It was all the way up in Silver Springs. We got finished with church and drove for 2 hours, got there just right in time for the closing at 2:30. And she saw me when she came in. You know, they all come in together. And she saw me and she covered her mouth, she covered her face. And then when she got up to give her testimony again, it was Chaplain Nancy was there when I was in the jail. If it wasn't for her, I might be back in jail. I just stood up and said, it's because of Jesus, and you heard the message, and you listened, and you said, yes, Lord. It was because of what you chose to do. But if nobody was there to tell the message, he said, go and tell the message to all the world. Well, I'm just going to tell the message in one little corner of Brevard County. But it's a corner where we got sort of a captive audience, and people are very interested in hearing if there's another way. You've got to bring the hope of Christ. You can't let the hope of the poor and the oppressed be taken away. So there I go in there, and she is now spreading the word. I got a text message a couple of weeks ago from a woman that hasn't been in jail in 4 or 5 years. Can you please pray for me? I just found out I have stage 3 cervical cancer. Can you just pray for me? She lives in Indian River County somewhere, and I'm trying to text back to her, try to arrange a meeting so we can get together and I can pray with her in person. But she remembered. She remembered our prayer. She remembered the love that I brought to her. You know, these women know that I love them, but I love them because I love the Lord, and the Lord gives me the ability to love them, but I do love them. And I just, you know, I'm inviting you all to be a part of what I'm doing. We're missionaries. I'm not on this payroll for the Sheriff's Department or the county or anybody. We have several churches that sponsor us monthly. This church gives us 50. This church gives us 100 on a monthly basis. We have 2 chaplains in there. We have bills to pay. We have benefits we need. And so we try to partner with Christian people and churches because you're the only people that understand that Jesus said, I was in prison and you visited me. Other people say, well, they made their bed, they can lie in it. But I'm going to tell you, but for the grace of God, it could be you or me. Driving on a suspended license because you had your insurance suspended because you couldn't afford to pay your insurance. And now you're driving because you have to get to the pharmacy to get the medicine for your husband with dementia, and now you're in jail for 6 months. And when she got out, she didn't have a place to live. She'd been evicted. She didn't have a pair of underwear because everything she owned had been thrown in the streets when she was evicted. But she's stuck with God, and she's still saying the stories. So God really touched her in a real way, and I'm grateful to have been blessed to have been a part of that. And I'm just inviting you to be a part of it too, because not everybody can go into the jail, but y'all can continue to pray for me now that you know I'm there. And if you can find any tangible ways that you would like to be a part of our ministry, I would like to invite you to do that. I'm pretty sure we don't have a whole lot of time left, but if anybody had any questions or comments, I'm open to that. Very quiet group you have here, Father Tom. Yeah.
Is taking him to jail a result of the reforms that were instituted by the mental health lobby to keep people from being incarcerated in mental health?
Well, if that goes all the way back to Geraldo Rivera, et cetera, we should be wise by now. I know that the Geraldo Rivera, Reagan era they had some really bad mental health facilities in New York. They did an expose, and then they said, we can't do this. Well, I'm going to tell you, we have a homeless population right now, and most of our homeless have mental health or drug problems or a combo platter of mental health and self-medication. So there may have been at some point some political idea that, well, we can't put people in mental health facilities against their will, except these are people who are obviously not able to make good decisions on their own. I'm going to go steal a beer and Kit Kats when I just got out of jail. And then I'm in jail and I'm pulling my hair out. I'm in my little cell by myself pulling my hair out. Obviously, I've got some issues that I'm not really shouldn't be making my own decisions. And at some point, that's why we have the Baker Act. Gives you a whole 72 hours and sometimes less, because if it's Friday night and it's not a full 72 hours, they say, you got to come get them. Which is, we need to do better. We need some lobbying to deal with the people. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that 83-year-old Faith just gets out. Let's just put her on the street, see what happens. She was 103 pounds and didn't know where she's supposed to go. So there may have been some lobbying at some point, but we need to have some, we need to think in logical, down-to-earth terms. What is the best plan for this person? You have to fight like crazy to get a person with intellectual disability into a group home in this state. I know because I have a son who's 48 years old, who we finally got into a group home in June. And have been, we've been on the waiting list for 18 years, and then finally I just said, guys, how long do I have to be on a waiting list? These people don't have anybody to advocate for them. I was a sign language interpreter for many years before. So when the deaf person comes into the jail, they call me. And I have to go to court, and I have to interpret in their first appearance in court. We've got a guy named Brooks Reed who's homeless. Brooks comes in and out, in and out, in and out. He's not even real sure how old he is. He's told me several different versions of how old he is. He has some fantasy that his parents are still living on Merritt Island somewhere, except Brooks is probably 68. He's deaf and low intellectual functioning. And I don't say that in any form of prejudice. I have two adopted deaf sons, one from Korea and the other one from Connecticut, and they're both functioning as independent adults. I don't believe in deaf and dumb, but I do believe that you can be deaf and have a low intellectual functioning. And he keeps getting arrested for trespassing because he goes to sleep in a park in Port St. John, and then the police come and arrest him because he's been trespassed from that park. And then he comes into jail. We need a system that says this guy shouldn't have to fight to get into a group home or someplace where he could be cared for and have a meal. The system should say this guy needs to be there, and let's put him through the process. But instead, it's just wash, rinse, repeat. You're in the jail, you're out of the jail, you're in the jail. You sleep in the park, you're in the jail. You're driving on a suspended, you're in the jail. Jail should be for the violent criminals that we're not safe if they're out there. But we need to have a different system. But since we don't have a different system, I need to be there to say, where's God in all this? I'll listen to the stories and there'll be chaos everywhere. Complete insanity. So many of the people in our jail have been in foster care for most of their childhood. They don't have where's your mom? I don't know, I know mom. So many of the people in our jail were sexually abused as children. We have a terrible story where one guy says that when he was like 5 years old, his mother gave him to her drug dealer. And you might imagine what that looks like. And it's no wonder that he's here. If any of us had some of the things that went on with any of them, we would be there too. And everything's a felony these days. Every frat boy should be arrested because throwing a beer bottle out of a moving car is now a felony. Ever since Homeland Security, that is called a projectile from a moving vehicle, it's a felony. So we have people in jail that we're not in any safer because they're there. And we wouldn't be any more in danger if they were out. But our system says you're arrested, you go here, and if you don't have enough money to pay bond. We didn't have enough money to pay insurance, so you're not going to have money to pay bond. And if you have a violation of probation, which probation just means you're going to come back. It's code for you're going to come back. Because once you're on probation, you can't go get a gallon of milk at 9 o'clock at night because if the probation officer comes by and you're past your curfew, now you're going back to jail. So the normal things that we do, that all of us do, you can't do if you're on probation because it's going to be a violation and you're going to be back in jail. So I just kind of continue to meet with them. They tell me some horrendous stories or just some convoluted stories and this and this and this, and they make a lot of excuses, but it's not my fault and this and this. That's like, where's God in all this? Where's God? Sometimes they'll say to you, oh, we're good. I talk to them all the time. Like, then how did this get here? I will point out to them that they're worshiping at the wrong altar. I will draw them an altar over here, and I'll put a cross, a chalice, a Bible. I'll draw them all over an altar over here, and I'll put some liquor bottles and some pill bottles and a pile of powder and some rocks and hypodermic needle, and I'll say, I don't know which of these things you're playing with, but eventually you'll probably play with all of them, and you're worshiping at the wrong altar. When you wake up, you don't say, thank you, Lord. What are we going to do today? You say, where am I going to get some more of this? You're focused on the wrong thing. You need to get unfocused because over here there's no God and there's no peace. And over here, if you know God, you'll know peace. So you need to stop. This is part of my counseling on a regular basis. And I will tell them, you need to stop justifying and minimizing everything you've done. They'll say, God put me in jail. He saved me. It's like, I have to tell you that my belief is that your decisions caused this because our lives are not governed by the dreams that we dream, but by the decisions we make. But God can work all things to the good. So now that you're here, he can work on that. And maybe this has been a nice time out for you. But don't blame God for the choices you made. You know, you've got to make good choices or you're going to end up with bad results. So I've talked to you longer than I probably should have. I haven't gotten to high side yet, but I feel like I'm just full of 100 stories, 1,000 stories. There's so many people in the jail. I guess it's always heartening to me to be in Walmart and somebody will walk up to me and I don't really recognize them because in the jail everybody's got a certain uniform on. And I can see you in your little gray suit or your little tan suit or your little red suit. Red is not good. If somebody you know is in red, it's not good. But if I see somebody coming up to me in Walmart and they have makeup on and their hair's done, and they say, oh, Miss Nancy, Chaplain Nancy, it's good to see you. It's like, oh, it's good to see you too. It's like, I'm not sure who you are, but I'm sure that I ministered to you at some point. And I will say, how are you doing now? Where are you working? What's going on? And the story will come out. Well, you remember I told you my sister was going to let me come and live with her, but that didn't work out. But I was able to get into this program, and I'll get the whole story. And then they'll say, can I have a hug? They still remember. They still know that they were loved and cared for. And that's pretty heartening for me. There's pretty much not anything better than knowing that somebody knows that you cared for them when they were on the dirt floor basement of their soul. So I guess I don't want to belabor. If anybody had any questions, I'd love to answer them. Oh, I got a question. It's good.
So it sounds like everyone is under spec. And there's only certain qualifications for someone to enter the jail,
Someone what?
to enter the jail, have to be qualified.
No, if you want to volunteer, we've got volunteer opportunities at the jail. If you would like to volunteer to teach a Bible study, you just go into the room. I mean, you get some training, but it's with me. I mean, I train you to do this, and I let you shadow me and go into Bible studies with me. But if you'd like to go into a classroom, and they announce Christian Bible study, and the women will come in. The men will come in. Depends on where you're going. Volunteers, women minister to women and men minister to men. But they will come in and you have something prepared. Usually I either teach a parable or an event in God's life, in Jesus' life, in his ministry on earth. And I will try to relate it to what's going on with them. Where are you in the story? What is Jesus saying to you with what's going on? Or, we'll talk about like the parable of the seeds. Everybody in jail, the seed falls on you and you're ready to bloom. But when you get out, what happens? Everything dies, So you tell a story, sing some songs, we play some music, they get all excited, music is great. Jesus, Take the Wheel, very famous. Favorite song. If you would be interested in that, I would love to talk to you. Some of my volunteers come and I get to know them. They get a better feel for it. They seem to really love it. And then I can ask them to come, an hour or two early and give them a few names and they can do some one-on-one counselings. But yeah, we are short-staffed. I mean, if you had just the desire to work in the office, because we have to load up carts. We give out about 3 cases of Bibles a month. But they have to ask us on this internal email system, can I have a Bible? Well, now we have to load that Bible on the card, and we have devotionals like Toward Day by Day or Daily Bread or In Touch, which is a Charles Stanley production. And there's some magazines that we get from, there's one called Victorious Living that I really like, and there's one that's a little more conservative that I like. But whatever they ask for, we try to put it together and put their name on it, and they have to send it to 200 or 300 or 400 or the annex where the women are. And we need people that can come in you know, once a week and spend a couple hours loading up carts. So yeah, we have lots of needs. You know, we have certainly financial needs. We have needs for people who are willing to really extend themselves and reach out and be face to face with people who are really struggling. But I'm telling you, these people are very loving and caring. When they're in jail, it's like because your third grade mental images, those bad people, they're in jail. Those people are not really bad people. I will tell you, I've probably hugged more murderers than anybody in here. You know, somebody does something in the heat of the moment, that doesn't really define who they are. It does mean that they're going to have some consequences, but I can have a conversation with them and really understand that that's not the defining of who they are. Unfortunately, that does mean that they're not going to be out in society if they've gone that severe. But most of my people are misdemeanor drug charges. Some of them do have some felony drug charges because there's some sales involved. Or too much, you have too much on your own person, they assume you're going to sell it. Drugs are the biggest issue, though, and they will cry and tell you that's not what they want to do. And I sit down with them and I say, so where are your kids? And this one's with this relative, and this one's with this relative, and this one's in DCF custody. And they weep. That's not what they really want, but they've been worshiping at the wrong altar. And that's where they land. Yeah. Local who?
Law enforcement, and get any, feedback from them on,
I'm working on that. I'm actually part of a group of faith-based leaders that meet regularly with the chief of police at Cocoa, but they recently changed chiefs of police. And Cantaloupe was, that was his name, Chief Cantaloupe was very involved in trying to get faith-based leaders to communicate with him about the needs of the community. And this new guy is getting ready to start that up, and I think next week we've got a meeting. But law enforcement isn't all that interested in meeting with chaplains, and it's also important to understand that I would have done a lot quicker for Faith if my hands weren't tied. I have to kind of try to work under the radar and surreptitiously. I tend to try to speak truth to power, but you can't stand toe-to-toe with the sheriff or the chief of police and say, what are you guys doing? You have to kind of meet with them in some little meeting and have a little kind of a side talk over here. You know, we got this guy in jail. He's been there a really long time, and he's schizophrenic. And I'm actually trying to get an opportunity. I've been talking to some people who are lobbyists in Tallahassee that are Episcopalians, and see if I can get up to Tallahassee and do some lobbying to say, can we do something kind of akin to Baker Act that says, if this person is obviously got a mental illness, can we just not take them to jail? Let's take them here. How about a citation, you know? This guy was walking naked down the street. Well, we got a problem. But let's take him to a mental health facility and see what we can do. Feels like we would be making better progress. Yeah.
what I'm thinking is the actual officers that have to enforce the law, probably also know these people. And make them a lot of time.
Well, some of them are very frustrated with the things like Brooks Reed, who is deaf and keeps coming in for trespassing. But they feel like their hands are tied and they don't have a choice because somebody said he's trespassed and they call and say, this guy's here again. And it seems like my first job out of high school, I was a dispatcher for the sheriff's department. And back in those days, they would call us and say, this is Ralph's phone number. Call his wife and tell her to come meet us up here at Stuckey's. He's had too many, he's not drinking. And she'd come there and pick him up, and they'd give her the keys, and that's that. Now, it's automatically you're going to jail. They used to be able to go to a park and say, you guys need to move along, you don't belong here, you know, you're going to get trespassed, just go. But now, if they're there, they have to arrest them. It used to be that if there was a domestic disturbance, they'd say, you know, Fred, you can't stay here tonight. I know what's going on with you and Tammy, but you need to find a friend to stay with. You can't be here tonight. Now, somebody's going to jail, maybe both of them. So we have tightened the noose so tight, the pendulum has swung so far, that everybody goes to jail. There is no grace in the system. And the police are frustrated too because they say, we don't have a choice. Did I see somebody else over here have a comment? Maybe not. So, yep.
Thank you for coming, and
think that's the deal, is when you're in third grade, the bad people go to jail. But a lot of people that go to jail aren't really bad people. They're just people who maybe didn't have enough money or maybe stepped off the curb for a minute, but like a kid tight-roping, they tried to get back on, but they were off long enough to get yanked. So thank you for understanding and hearing the stories. Thanks a lot. We're at church in 15 minutes.